I think I'm a special one.
Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here. Hope you're having an amazing Tuesday so far. As promised, I wanted to do a show just purely responding to some of your comments that you've left on my recent shows on YouTube. So we're going to delve into that today quite a bit in terms of different topics and to give you my thoughts, whether I agree, disagree, and I'm sure you will respond as well in the comments to some of the comments and some of the topics that we delve into today. Please like, subscribe, all of that good stuff, but let's jump into it. Firstly, hear from Roland TB3, who is talking and responding to my show that I did during the international break about sort of this mass exodus that could be happening during the summer transfer window. And he says, sell, reduce loan list, host of players, Felix, Nkunku, Sancho, Mudryk, Sterling, Chilwell, Chalobah, Guiu and Vega do not fit Maresca's style of play. Then there are players, Dazassi, Badiashile, Dewsbury Hall, Tosin, Sancho are not top four ready. 25-26, the focus has to be a competitive starting 11, capable of competing for top four titles, Champions League, strong and durable to handle midweek games and tournament competitions, Carabao, FA, Europa, Champions League. Chelsea rebuild around Cucurella, Caicedo, Fernandes, Palmer, Gusto, James, Jackson, Colwell, Madueke and Fofana. I have to say, you break down a lot there, and although I can have some quibbles about certain players within that, I have to say, at least the core you want to build around, I agree with. Cucurella, yes. Caicedo, yes. Fernandes, Palmer, Gusto, James, Jackson, Colwell, Madueke, Fofana. I think all of those names are ones that are at least players that have shown in their Chelsea career so far, not necessarily this season, but I think have shown enough to, you can buy into something. You can buy into them being given more time and with a better structural system around them. That makes sense. The problem is it's just so bloated elsewhere. And I do think that there is a relevant point here of kind of when you question Chelsea's recruitment is when you bring in a head coach that you are briefing that you really believe in, and at the very least you believe in his style of play or his way of approaching football, and then you purchase players who don't seem to fit into that. That's something that has puzzled me a lot, is that when you actually look at the components of this squad and you look at this season, I don't think it's a coincidence that the start of the season went so well because we played a style of football that better suited the components of our squad. Because we do have transitional players, we do have pace in the team, especially in attack. These are players who are either used in their career to playing transitional football or it just more naturally suits their skill sets. Whatever it is, I think that's why it worked earlier in the season and why this slow, tepid positional play doesn't work as well. I also think that the issue you've got when you go for slow positional play, and this is just a reality, I think, is, everyone brings up Pep Guardiola. You need to have incredible players. You need to have the best of the best, undeniably, for that system to work. You need to have players in every single position who are in the top 10 in the world. And of course, that requires, which it's not like Chelsea haven't put in a load of money already, but it requires you to put in a lot of money. It requires you to massively increase your wage bill, which doesn't seem to be the case. So that is why we're once again in another summer where it's a little bit cluttered. But I want to hear your thoughts. I mean, just on his point there in terms of absolutely, the aim is you need to have a competitive starting 11 now. You need to have a balanced issue and kind of a balanced look of the squad to compete. Completely agree. I just want to ask you guys in the comments whether you agree about that kind of core of players that you continue to build around. Because I actually don't think he's off there. Really, Cucurella is massively improved. Caicedo, I think, has had a really good season. Fernandes has, I think, shown just enough where you can see him maybe getting better. Cole Palmer doesn't need explaining. Malo Gusto had a really good first season, has had a poor second season, but I think the first season is good enough where I'd want to keep him. Reece James, yes, we can hope maybe he stays fit. Jackson, yes. Colwell, yes. Madueke, I think, is Chelsea's strongest winger based on output, and Fofana as well. So I think there's a lot there, and I want to hear your thoughts. At the Bridge Pod, definitely just go and listen and follow those guys. I'll be a guest on pretty soon, so at the Bridge Pod, go and check it out. He says, I've spoken to many match-going fans, and majority have said the style of play is truly dreadful to watch when you're sat at the game. I don't just think it's at the game. I think if you're watching it at home, which obviously as some of the away games I've watched, it's as bland. But it is a major issue because I just don't think the football, and it may sound like waffle, it may not sound convincing to some of you. I just think Maresca's football, or at least the way I'm seeing it at the moment, is just, it's like an antidote to the things that make football enjoyable for people. It's kind of all of the things that you don't want in a football team, or you don't want to be able to engineer a hostile environment against your opposition. This football seems to buy into and create. Slow on the ball, not a lot of aggression, not a lot of movement, not a lot of chaos, not a lot of surprise, and kind of, there is just a reality, not just in football, but I also think when you look at, again, talked about in the first answer, what worked earlier in the season, Chelsea were a lot more chaotic, and yes, there was a risk of Chelsea conceding at the other end, but at the very least there was an attack that you could look at in terms of output and go, I believe we should stick with that. A lot of people keep on talking about, they bring up Pep, they bring up Klopp, they bring up Arteta. I think Klopp is the relevant one for earlier in the season, because if you looked at the early years of Liverpool under Klopp, it was messy at times. Like, they were really vulnerable in a number of ways, especially defensively. Like, they had some incredible attacking players and individuals, and that was clear, and that has been clear for a number of years, even post Klopp now. But they clearly had an ability where you could see where it was going, that he kind of, the common consensus is you start from the back, and I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but Klopp seemed to reverse engineer it, where I'm going to get just productive forwards who are going to play a style of football that buys into maybe the history of Liverpool, or just gets people on side very early on and makes people believe in this team. They're able to overwhelm some opposition on a number of occasions, make people believe that the team is going to grow and get better. And then, of course, when you bring in the elite defenders or elite individuals in key positions, that refines that structure, and they end up winning a Premier League title and a Champions League as well. That sounds very simple, but that's where I think people who talk about Klopp and talk about, just giving coaches time, I think that was a justification pre-Christmas, because I think you could absolutely look at a team that had flaws within it, absolutely, but you could look at them and go, okay, I can see this team with smart investment, with time, feasibly getting better. The issue you've got post-Christmas is the style of play has sucked any of that out. I don't know how you make a convincing argument currently that Chelsea are anywhere close to the likes of Liverpool. I just don't. I think you have to shut off your brain and analysis after the Spurs game in December, or the Brentford game in December, before things started to turn the other way. And that's the only thing you're taking into account, which I think is disingenuous, because as much as people have a go at maybe me and others for being too negative after Christmas, well, there's a sizable chunk, there's kind of two sizable chunks in, the season doesn't end in November. So, I think if you're just looking at that first half of the season, that's not enough. There needed to be more. And unfortunately, I think an undeniable reality is the style that Maresca loves, the style that Maresca was brought in to implement, the more that's become a reality and replicated, the worse Chelsea have got. Not only visually, but just aesthetically. It's just an output, like in terms of form and actual results, that's undeniable too. So that's why things need to adapt and change. I really do. I don't think Maresca is either going to get Chelsea where they need to be with the current level of performance, and I also just think stylistically it's not going to win people over, because it doesn't seem to be aggressive enough, physical enough for the league. It doesn't seem to get the best out of the components of the squad, which is part of coaching, surely. Chris Chelsea says here, Maresca out immediately. He has infected the team with massive doses of negativity, lack of belief. His persistence with Sanchez is a sackable offence. I want to combine this with a comment from Mike King, which goes in the other way. Remember this, we are fourth and we know our shortcomings, and we are doing well for our shortcomings, and it actually shows. We ain't that bad. We had no striker last week. We can't do nothing against top teams without a striker. Neto is not a striker, and it's just a case of not getting embarrassed by Arsenal like last season, and no Cole Palmer. It was always going to be damage limitations, especially with Sanchez in goal last season, 5-0. So this is specifically responding to what I had to say post-Arsenal, but it's still relevant today. So you have two points of view, basically, that are being replicated at the moment. You have the Maresca out, kind of, I'm done with him. I don't want to see him coach beyond this season. And other people kind of wanting to look at context and say he hasn't actually had, his full complement of players, and that has hurt him. Now, are we being too harsh on Enzo Maresca? And am I being too harsh on Enzo Maresca? I think maybe yes and no, in terms of, yes, maybe sometimes our analysis can go too far on just looking at the head coach. And I think that is a relevant point. One of the things I've consistently stressed is if you think Maresca is a problem, don't think of Maresca as Thanos, as like an MCU level villain. He is the Red Skull in the first Avenger. He is Ronan in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Sorry if you're not an MCU fan and this is all going over your head, but effectively, in terms of super villains, in terms of problems, this is not the final boss. This is if you're playing video games, this is an earlier boss that you have to defeat. Which is why, if you're looking at Enzo Maresca, he is not the biggest issue at Chelsea. And for all my frustrations with him as a head coach, the problem really is linked to the people who appointed him, and I think should hold most of the responsibility. A lot of people believe that if Enzo Maresca is given time, and there is a key component that I think becomes a problem, time, and also is given better players, his style of football will prove to be good. And that's a mythical it's a hard thing to completely rubbish because we haven't seen it. I do think there is a level of just incompetent squad building that would limit a lot of coaches in the current situation. I will concede that. However, you are kind of then left in this situation where unless the sporting directors and unless Chelsea's transfer strategy completely 180s to a point where we sign ready-made brilliant players and completely turns around the mood in terms of not just a club, but suddenly we look like a more competent football club again, you can always kind of have that, there's no other way to describe it, excuse for Maresca. Because you can always say, well, he doesn't have the players available to him. He doesn't have the right players. And whether there's a core and tenet of truth there, the now should still matter. His performance as a coach should still matter. And I think it's also incumbent on him as a coach to prove that what he's doing is worth buying into. Not just because he has a certain style of play, he wants to have the ball a lot with his team. He wants us to pass a lot, and he comes from a school of Pep Guardiola. That is enough to prove he's good enough to be Chelsea head coach. I think what will prove that he deserves more time is getting us back in the Champions League. That's the first point. It's an improvement on last season. Winning the Conference League is a non-negotiable, but it will be a nice moment for him personally as a head coach. And then next season, there needs to be increased improvement. There needs to be a sign that either he adapts to the club and adapts to a style that better suits the players that he has, or he proves that his style is the only way to go. Trust is the most important thing here, and I think the lack of trust across the club is key. I think that it'd be hard for me to sit here based on what I said last year. And unlike others, I don't forget what I said last year and kind of change my opinion on a weekly basis. I said if Chelsea get Champions League football, I think I will deem this season a success. Not, champagne bottle popping success, like, we're going to have an open top bus parade for it. But it will be seen as an improvement. It's very hard, I think, to argue against that being an improvement. So the final couple of comments here is regarding the top 5 kind of problems with Chelsea. If you haven't seen it, I made it during the international break. Please go and check it out. I go in a lot of detail and depth in terms of kind of the biggest problems and mistakes or errors and things that just make the club not feel right at the moment. So go and check that out. But this is clearly a comment from it and responding to it. Pack here says, I think the vision is clear. Make Chelsea sustainable by making Chelsea a buy and sell club. Simple. Chelsea fans just can't reconcile with this because Roman gave us so much success that we are used to this. These owners believe it will be difficult, but many big clubs have become mediocre and gotten away with it. So yes, Chelsea fans can moan, but they won't ever fall out of love with Chelsea. Yeah, we won't ever fall out of love with Chelsea. Like love is, undying. It's you can dislike in certain ways. That's relationships, right? Like you can go through periods where you don't feel as great. I love pizza, but there are some times where I don't want pizza. But anyway, let's get back to the main point, which is making Chelsea sustainable. I think my issue with this is it just, I've consistently said there's a clash here. I was listening to the Athletic podcast. I think it's just their main football podcast, but they had Simon Johnson on. The title on YouTube of it is, why are Chelsea buying players? so soon. And it was about Quenda, it was about Asugo, and it was Simon Johnson, Adam Leventhal was the presenter, and you had Tim Spears was on there as well. And it goes off into a broader conversation about Chelsea's transfer strategy. And one of the things they eventually get to is Maresca and kind of the expectations between now and the end of the season, and this clash and conflict that I think has been there from the start of this ownership, that it's very hard, I think, to market to people, especially Chelsea fans, but just on a basic level, to kind of get them to lower their expectations when you spend so much in the transfer window. I think it's a very hard thing. I think it's impossible to market it. To market that, well, we're going to spend... I heard some wild numbers that this is like the most expensively assembled squad ever, effectively. Our squad, in terms of what we paid for players, cost more than Real Madrid. Those are those kind of facts. I mean, they just are facts that I find it very difficult for people if you're just going to argue back, well, that doesn't matter, or you can't grasp why some people aren't overwhelmingly positive about everything going on at Chelsea at the moment. I think it's very difficult. That can kind of give you an explanation, because logically in football, and it's not just Chelsea, but it's across the football world, when you spend a lot, there should be a return. There should be an ability where if you're spending that much, you're going to buy improved players. And it kind of feels like we've taken the ideal and the mindset, as we kind of technically have, from Brighton, from Monaco, from selling clubs who can do decent things and in their own way are successful based on their level of expectation in history, but then trying to implement it, kind of turbocharge it, and then expect it to be welcomed as success. I just don't think that. I think that's a very difficult thing. I just think it clashes up against it. You know, if I've said this before, I think if Chelsea were a buy and sell club now, but they were limited financially and they weren't spending over $1 billion on their squad, and we had to sell some of our best players, if whatever reason, right, post sanctions, we can't spend as much, we refuse to spend as much, and we actually rely a lot more on our academy, I do firmly believe people would be a lot more forgiving of that situation than seeing the club at times rip up previous plans, you know, buy players, and then 6 months later they're out on loan after spending a lot on them, having constant rebuilds every summer. That increases a level of expectation. It does. And when you're an ownership that breathes consistently that what this is going to lead to, it's going to lead to overwhelming mad success, 100 points tally in the Premier League, you are responsible for building up that expectation, and I think that is something that just baffles me when people can't accept that they have played a hand in that. Historically, yes. Culturally, yes. Chelsea fans have been conditioned to see changing the head coach as kind of the trigger, the lever for success. I think I've talked about that a number of times pre-Clearlake. I think that has been a problem at times. Absolutely, you have to I mean, that's the culture. That's the psychology, right? And that may be a problem. But also, fans have memories. They have memories of the club winning Champions Leagues in the last decade. They have memories of the club buying the best players, and I think it gets people's backs up when they hear that the previous ownership that did wonders for the club were actually not that great and not terribly well run, and then you oversee a period of failure and oversee some really embarrassing moments, and again, like, that's going to be thrown back in your face. I think it's simple A to B psychology. I think it's just, you know, your action creates a reaction, and that's one of the things that frustrates me. So I would just say on this, their vision could turn out to be brilliant, but that doesn't mean that in the current moment we can't assess it, we can't analyze it, and I can't sit here and tell you right now I don't have much faith, because I actually think it's built up on a bit of evidence, and why a lot of people are kind of, if you want to put it down as moaning, criticizing, being negative, whatever it is, I think that's why at the current moment. The final thing here is regarding the development of the team. Papa Brej here says, it's the consistent staggering of development for the whole team that frustrates me the most. Granted, it's a hypothetical, but imagine where we could be performance-wise and confidence-wise if Petrovic was our number one keeper this season. If you're going to go for this young talent model and not have any experienced and accomplished players to give them help, guide them, you need the best young player in in each position consistently for the entire season to get all of these personalities and talents together. Chopping and changing them week in and week out is one thing, but playing one of the more senior players in Sanchez, despite the ridiculously high number of big mistakes he is making every single game, is ludicrous, and you are seeing the effect it's having on our defenders. For instance, feels like they've wasted an entire season on one of the most important positions for legitimately no reason. This is a brilliant comment. This kind of sums it up so perfectly, because it kind of feels like self-defeating. I said this in Monday's show about Petrovic. I think this is where the comment's from in terms of Petrovic and how well he's doing at Strasbourg. Is you can loan out a player, they can do well, they can develop. That's what the loan system, I think, in a lot of ways should be used for, and when it's working well. But then you've completely forgotten your own goalkeeping situation. If Chelsea still had Thibaut Courtois, if they still had Petr Cech, if they even had Edouard Mendy on a good day, you could kind of understand it a lot more. The problem is, again, I think Sanchez in so many ways symbolises why people are frustrated at the current moment, where you are just overlooking the present. You are overlooking the important things, that you just allowed incompetence to kind of rule one of the most crucial positions on the pitch, and you've spent so much, you've bought so many players, but you've overlooked this key position. Logically, your mind goes, why is that? Why have we overlooked that? Why have we sent an objectively good, or at least young, talented goalkeeper to our satellite club, leaving ourselves so weak in a position that clearly was going to be a problem for Enzo Maresca throughout the entirety of the season? It's those things again, A to B. That's why people are frustrated. And I also do think that, you do need, if you're going to go really young, you need to hope that you are snapping up the best young talent in the world. And they are players that don't need the guidance of older players. I think that's a major risk. I can't think of many players out there, unless you are a freak like Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, and even those players at times in their careers will probably have learned and been guided by elder figures, figures who either knew a lot about the clubs they were at or kind of gave them wisdom when they needed it to kind of pick them up. Even the greatest of all time. I mean, you really are hoping that the likes of Andre Santos, Esteban Willian, Cole Palmer is a great example right now. I hope he snaps back into brilliant form, but Cole Palmer, I think part of his struggle is that he doesn't have anyone around him or in the current squad who can talk to him as kind of a senior pro who is either at his level in terms of production. I mean, you can call Tosin a leader, but he's not even the best defender at Chelsea. So it's not a case where, even as an elder statesman who is coming towards the end of their career, who maybe isn't always performing 10 out of 10, at least, Thiago Silva, been there, seen it, done it, had been involved in major triumphs with Chelsea. There's none of that. So these young players are kind of left in the wilderness. And at times, I think it's why you see a lot of problems in terms of performance, and why I do have sympathy for the players. I really do, because I look at some of them and I think, I've brought up the Mudryk example before, where I kind of feel sorry for the bloke that he was brought into Chelsea, when I actually think all the pressure and expectation and hype placed on his shoulders was unfair, because he clearly wasn't ready for it. And if he'd gone to another environment that was better for his development, he might have then been able to come to Chelsea in a future scenario where it just at least developed as a better player. So yeah, it's kind of all on those young shoulders. And, I think it's unfair on them because there's so much pressure and scrutiny on them. And I kind of just don't buy the, I think it's an easy get out for the decision makers and the head coach to say, well, you got young players, so that's why we're failing. Like, no, you constructed this squad. You gave this squad no experience. You ripped out experience from it. And that's why these young players are probably, really struggling at times to get through barren spells, because they don't have anyone around them who knows how to get out of that. Like, you would kill for an Azpilicueta right now. You would kill for an Olivier Giroud up top to help someone like Nicholas Jackson. I'm not even talking about Frank Lampard and John Terry and Didier Drogba. I'm not even and I love Dave, right? I thought Giroud was a brilliant player. You just need to look at recent history when Marcos Alonso, for instance, someone who is at the very least maybe not always the most exemplary professional, but has moments throughout the season, make him an important player, or just players that maybe in the dressing room give moments of wisdom. These are those intangible things that a spreadsheet and underlying metrics probably don't reveal to you. But I do think, based on all the football books I've read, based on all the football I've studied, based on all the interviews I've read and heard and watched from professionals, how important that culture is. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. And if they keep going down this model, the thing you hope is an Esteval, for instance, is as great as everyone says he is, and he ain't impacted by outside factors, and he turns up and he's the star boy, and he just goes from strength to strength. Same with Santos, same with Cole Palmer. That's what you're hoping, and as what I would say is, yeah, that'd be a dream scenario, but it would be a freakish scenario, no doubt about that. Even at clubs like Real Madrid, young players like Vinicius Jr. have had a lot of years of development before they've become the player they are now. So that is it for today's show. Let me know if you'd like for me to do more of this, responding to comments from recent shows in the comments below, because I may feature some in the future. We're back tomorrow for the big preview of the Spurs game. We'll be going through the team news, all of that good stuff, as Chelsea prepare to return to action on Thursday night against Spurs at the Bridge. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening on the podcast feed. And I will see you again very soon. All the best. Have a great day.